Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to have an expert panel on leveraging AI-powered solutions for data management. And our sponsors today are Ascend.io, Fivetran, and Reltio. For our presentations today, we'll hear first from Evan Levy with TDWI. And after Evan speaks, we'll be joined by Sean Knapp with Ascend.io, David Millman with Fivetran, and Sushant Rai with Reltio for a panel discussion. Before I turn over the time to our speakers, please allow me to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and at the end of their presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. So if at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can click on the Technical FAQs area and you'll receive technical assistance. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. Lastly, we are recording today's event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you'd like. Again, today we're going to be discussing leveraging AI-powered solutions for data management, and our first speaker is Evan Levy. He's a research fellow with TDWI. Evan is also a management consultant in enterprise data strategy, data management, analytics, and systems integration. He advises clients on strategies to address business challenges using their existing data and technology assets coupled with new and creative methods and practices. With more than 25 years of experience consulting with clients, Evan leads classes and workshops offering practical real-world experience to address challenges in a manner that utilizes existing skills coupled with new methods to ensure IT and business success. With that, please welcome Evan, and I will hand it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Andrew. It's terrific to be here. I'm actually quite excited with the conversation and discussion we're going to have today. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with these folks. I think all of you are going to find the insights and experiences that this panel brings to the table very, very interesting. Let's go ahead and jump into the material. I mean, one of my roles in having or participating is really trying to frame the discussion so we can get the ideas starting to flow. So there's a very brief, probably 10 minutes or so, review of some data management concepts and ideas to be able to plant some stakes in the ground for us to start our conversation. So I'll start off with some data points that TWI research has seen from all the different surveys that we do, specifically focused in the areas of data management. We'll talk about then how AI, or the injection, if you want, or inclusion of artificial intelligence into the phrase actually strengthen data management, provide some level of functionality and capabilities that many of you may not even be aware of. We tend to look at data management as like this assembly line or bang of hammers, nails, screws, and so forth to build stuff. But we've really seen some pretty phenomenal benefits from merging of artificial intelligence into the whole data management lifecycle pipeline, assembly line, however you want to characterize it. It offers some fairly unique and, if not clever, solutions. We'll then get into where we see data management going, some of the emerging trends, because if there's one thing that I can assure you is data is not going away. In fact, I continually have discussions with some of the folks that I work with, some of the clients, and they're continually astonished, or maybe surprised is a better word, on how some of the biggest obstacles in accomplishing the artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the variety of different processing is if they don't get their data organized, it becomes an obstacle or a stumbling block. I mean, a lot of people don't realize the whole idea of artificial intelligence is to think or have the machine enabled to do that. So it's going to study lots and lots of detailed data. And in order to do that, it's got to be able to find it, understand it, and interpret it. So data management is near and dear to the heart of enabling AI. And then we'll jump into the panel discussion and hear from the experts on some of the things they've seen, some of their experiences, and some of their recommendations. So I think you're going to find this a very, very interesting discussion. Let's go on to the next slide. Let me start off. Sometimes not everybody's aware of the definition. Certainly, we're not going to have a test at the end of this. But I thought I'd pop up a couple of definitions to try and make sure everybody's aware of just the broad range of capabilities and functions and details that relate to the term or the premise of the area of data management. Refers to the activities that control the creation, maintenance, use, and deletion of data to ensure data quality, accessibility, and security. So it's not just about forklifting it from point A to point B. It's about transforming it and making it understandable. It's one thing to get a data set or a file with a few thousand fields and several million records, But in reality, how do we make sure that we understand what it is, that we've interpreted it correctly, and that we package it in a way to make it usable for everyone? We tend not to think about those things, but there's a fair amount of effort that's involved when I'm pulling data out of a teller or a POS environment or a large data system or something that's streaming content because of user input or feedback into making it something that someone with a spreadsheet or someone with a query tool can actually use and understand. A lot of times people use the concept of a supply chain, a data supply chain, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. So the practice of collecting, organizing, accessing data to support productivity, efficiency, and decision making. I mean, again, we don't just collect data for the sake of it. We're not trying to jam as much as we can into our garage of data content. We want to make sure that it's usable and accessible. I mean, probably the easiest paradigm to consider is the difference between a library and a warehouse. Now, if I wanted to warehouse as many books as possible, I'd take them, I'd jam them in every nook and cranny. But then what good would it be? Because I couldn't find the book that I was looking for. The whole premise of data management isn't to just store it all and store it efficiently, but also being able to find it. So how do I convert this garage of content into something that's more of a marketplace of detail where people can find it, poke around, look at it, and potentially add to it? So the third, the comprehensive discipline that includes the processes, architectures, policies, practices, and tools used to manage the data lifecycle across the enterprise. And I'd say that's the other thing that I'd have you also keep in mind when we're talking about data management. All too often, we all have our to-do lists of things to do, and we're trying to get our task done to move on to the next one. And so we're either moving data or packaging it or building queries or reports or whatever it might be. And we tend to be focused at this point in time to deliver against this individual project or task. The thing that I encourage all of you to consider, particularly in today's discussion, is this is about how do we make sure that data is reusable? How do we package it in a way that it's not just for a single report or single database, but that others can use it later on? I mean, the whole premise and point of success here is how do we make sure that we make data multi-purpose and usable so it's understood as what it means? Because maybe it's a report today, but maybe it's going to help a predictive model later on, or in fact, other types of processing and analysis in the future. So one thing that I encourage you as we have this discussion is think about how do you make sure that your data has more broad appeal and usability. And then finally, comprises all the disciplines related to managing data as a valuable resource, including collecting, keeping, and using data in a secure and efficient and cost-effective manner. So here comes the other spin, if you want to call it that, which is not just packaging them. Do we understand the content and what is the content inside that file, container, or whatever it might be, but also how do we make it understandable? Things like naming conventions and terms, things like data cataloging, the Dewey Decimal, whether you want to call it, how do I find the content that we're looking for? And do people understand and interpret it correctly? Do things like sales and revenue and earnings, what do those things really mean? And how do we make sure that when we use those terms with a data set or on a report that people actually understand those concepts? So again, trying to do a very quick review. So when we talk about data management, it's that entire data supply chain of taking raw material and making it usable and accessible. Let me jump on to the next slide, because this is something I think offers a little bit of context in the real world. TWI does surveys throughout the year. You can find them at twi.org. There's a whole treasure trove of content, and these are real world people like you listening today that answer the questions. And we're not looking to lead an audience. It's what's the audience doing? So this first one that I pulled, what could be improved in your company's data management practice to make it more successful? And as you can see, it was to pick 3. So statistically, it's probably within a percentage point or two, because when you ask an audience to pick 3, there's some statistical imbalance that occurs. But nonetheless, what strikes me is clearly architecture is the top, because people want some level of organization design. But then you start looking at some of the specifics: data governance tooling, data quality tools, metadata, and so forth. And you see very, very quickly the idea that the specific tactical capabilities and functions matter. They're top of mind, because we can talk about a generalized view of organizing our content. But if we don't have the specific tooling and capabilities and functions, then I'm not going to make it usable. I can't paint things with a broad brush. Is the data accurate? Is it trustworthy? Do I believe the values? And do I have the right type of tooling to audit and measure that? The other thing that I'd tell you is the whole premise of pipelining, streaming, orchestration, transformation. I can convert a piece of data, but if I don't deliver it to the right place at the right time, what good is it? I have a very good friend. Her husband is a nuclear pharmacist. And he has drugs that treat certain types of cancers and other things. And it's not just about being able to concoct and mix and create this formulary or this drug. It's also delivering it to the right place at the right time because it has a shelf life or an expiration. And we sometimes don't think about data in that way. Now, we always take a look at historical things in the world of analytics, but sometimes having data at the precise time allows us to act. There's all kinds of things with screen pops, messaging that we want to engage with business users. So the thing that I'd have you consider, particularly with this survey item, is it isn't always about, let me take a look at the last year. Maybe I need to get the data that's occurred in the last few moments and be able to make decisions and take action. And I've got to have all these pieces in place, because if one piece isn't strong enough, then I can't deliver the solution. At the end of the day, people aren't congratulated because they have a great transformation capability. They're congratulated because I was able to act on a business event or make a decision. So this is a core important piece. As you can see, there's a lot of pieces and parts here that are top of mind with folks, that if I don't have all these pieces, I'm going to be hamstrung. Let's move on to the next one. So then the next is, what are your organization's top priorities to modernize data integration, transformation, and preparation process? So the prior one was, what is everything that you're doing? This one is, if I take a look at the age and functionality, and am I doing things as quick as possible? I'd say that's the other thing. We sometimes suffer when we get comfortable with technology, that there's a way we've always done something, we're always going to do it that way. And sometimes you luck out. It's like the world of the can openers. It's like some people love electric can openers. I love the manual one because for the last 100 years, it always works. I clip it on the top of the can, I twist it, and the top pops off. Now, I don't have to open 1,000 cans a day. I open one or two, and my dogs are happy about that. The point that I'm trying to drive towards here is, it's not modernization for the sake of modernization. It's modernization because of things like automation, productivity, improved reliability. I mean, we've seen manufacturing in the world of building stuff. We have computers and automation engaged because of productivity and improvement. Reduces cost. The whole premise here with AI and machine learning and data management is, what can we do to increase productivity on something that's critically important? As you can see through these items, and I've checked them again, increase AI-infused automation, reduce the amount of copying, centralized orchestration, self-service data collection, establish and expand real-time data streaming. I mean, it's clear that the whole premise and world of data management isn't just a back office IT function. It's a function that everybody needs, because whether it's the large, heavy forklifting and manipulation in the back end of pulling large volumes from large systems, or as I'm working on my own desktop or with my own personal analytical needs, I need to move things around, and I don't want to be dependent upon Excel macros and functions. I want a more robust level of functionality. So the thing that I have you consider is, as we talk and go through the aspects of data management, it's not just for developers. It's actually a cadre or breadth of functionality and capabilities for all of us, developers as well as end users. So let's go ahead and move on. You can see, obviously, a fairly large, substantial number when we're talking about pick 4. I've tried to put a very, very simple illustration here, which is the breadth, and many of us are in the cloud environment now. Over on the left, we have external data, all the variety of sources, whether they be data generated from our application systems, things we buy from third parties, syndicated data content, or our business partners, whether it be suppliers, vendors, and so forth. So data's coming from a lot of different places. And the challenge of managing all those connections, sometimes we have to go get it, sometimes it's delivered to us, sometimes it's a continual delivery. So there's a whole slew of variety functions, connections, and so forth that we need to be able to keep track of, because, again, I need all the content. I need to be able to support that variety, because when it comes down to it, every user in many instances has their own personal combination of data content. It's not just a standard set of reports. It's incremental data to allow them to answer their unique business questions. I may have 24 people in marketing. I may have 40 people in logistics. While they may look at some core reports and details, many of them are looking at incremental content to be able to answer and address the types of needs they have. Anyway, then we inevitably have the processing platforms, from whether it be a data lake or repository or number of other types of storage platforms and applications, the core data warehouse or analytics platform, and then obviously purpose-built capabilities over on the right, and then obviously delivered to the analytic and operational types of functions. So the reason for the diagram is all too often we tend to focus on the area that's just our specific duty. We don't take a look at the entire spectrum of capabilities because, again, this is part of a life cycle or a supply chain. It grows stronger as I make things more robust and more capable, and it's more usable. So maybe it starts with I'm delivering data to an MDM hub because here's a subject area data source. But realistically, I want to make that data available as reference data to other reporting and analytics. And by the same token, if I'm delivering reports, I want to make that data available to others to be able to address whether it be operational or historical analysis needs. So if we take a look of how I've tried to cut up and show why data management touches all these places and where I believe that we can see some just substantial revolutionary improvement over on the left side of that diagram, the whole managing the sources. We have everything now from the manual data discovery to automated data discovery, where I can actually apply technology and have it go examine dozens, hundreds, thousands of files for specific data content that I want to find, and also profile and understand, is this applicable to my particular need? We talk about which data sources should I use because maybe I want to build a model for prediction. But how often are you able to say, because you know something, for this particular age range or this target audience, there are better sources for identifying that prediction and that target audience versus this other type of audience? Understanding and being able to manage and track the details of sources dynamically is really a boon to the whole direct marketing target analysis type of environment. And then obviously cataloging, keeping track and inventorying all those sources so I can communicate and track and look it up later. There's nothing worse than having to inventory a file twice, or unfortunately in some places 14 times, when I could have automated the whole cataloging of that. Let's jump into the middle of that diagram, which is actually the managing of how do I track and link and identify how we map source to target. Well, again, this is where AI can benefit for those of you that have environments that have been around 10, 15 years, or even 2 or 3. It will go learn the mappings that you've already accomplished and done, and then apply it to new data sets where naming conventions and details are similar, or even if they're not, if they look at the underlying content, and then understand and map and actually interact with a developer saying, hey, are these the mappings that you'd like? Just tremendous productivity improvements. We also have the inevitable bread and butter of how do I cleanse and standardize content, and that's some of this functionality has been around for a while, but we never even talked about how data standardization was AI assistance. That's been a fairly prevalent capability. And then again, as we progress through the life cycle or the supply chain, how do we continually update the catalog and inventory? And then the final, or the next to final area, if you want to call it that, is how do we make sure that we're supporting the users with the types of things they need, not just delivering reports, but giving them the self-service analytics, self-service data preparation, and making an interactive method so they can capitalize on the incrementally larger data sets from both depth and width and just new findings. So, I mean, this is not about making a data engineer more productive. This is about making the breadth of users, whether it be a developer or an end user or an analyst, more productive by injecting AI in much the same way chatbots have allowed all of us to benefit from being able to ask a variety of questions. So the whole goal here is really how do we progress incrementally and benefit from the introduction and inclusion of AI. So with that, me talking a bit quickly, as most of you noticed, let me turn this back over to Andrew.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Evan. That was a great presentation there, and it is now time for our panel discussion. So please allow me to introduce today's panelists. First up is Sean Knapp with Ascend.io. Sean is the founder and CEO of Ascend.io, the agentic data engineering platform. Prior to Ascend.io, Sean was co-founder and CTO at Ooyala, where he oversaw product engineering and solutions and playing key roles in scaling the company to 500 plus employees, as well as the acquisition. Before that, Sean worked at Google, where he was the tech lead for Google's legendary web service fronted engineering and ads UI teams. We're also joined today by David Millman with Fivetran. As a partner sales engineer at Fivetran, David works with the largest to smallest systems integrators tasked with changing their customers' business with data. He brings 20 plus years of practical experience to the discussion, from developing large-scale real-time transactional systems to big data solutions and now enabling AI implementations. Sean and David, please go ahead and turn on your cameras for me. And finally, Sushant Rai with Reltio. As VP of Product Management at Reltio, Sushant leads the product strategy and portfolio management for the enterprise data platform that powers digital transformation and customer experience. He has over 16 years of experience in the software industry with a focus on CRM, customer success, and partner management. Sushant is passionate about delivering innovative and scalable solutions that create value for customers and partners. And with that, Evan, I will go ahead and pass it back to you so you can begin the discussion with these folks.
Well, terrific, gentlemen. I'm so excited to be able to have the opportunity to have this discussion and talk, see what your views are. And what I'll do is, just so the audience is aware, is we'll go through each question and I will round robin it and call on the individuals so everybody has not only time to respond, but we don't end up stepping on each other. So let me go ahead and let me start off with David. What can a company expect from an investment in AI focused on data management? What are the benefits?
Well, first of all, thank you. Excited for the conversation. I think the big thing is we talk about data management and the tools around that, but ultimately it has to be business outcomes, right? So, I look at it and put down a marker that says you should be looking for $1 billion plus coming out of whatever you're investing with AI and data. For larger companies, that will be too small. For big companies, that's a stretch goal, but that's really the goal of it, because we're going to be optimizing every aspect of the data supply chain and how people interact with all aspects of the data. The data is the one thing that can ultimately impact everything in a company's 10K and their P&L. And we should be, our goal as data management engineers and professionals is to make sure that that happens. I'll give you a quick example. Working with a partner, they've gone very AI-based. They are able to now deliver to their customers what would have taken them 6 months, 9 months in the past, in somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. And I think that power, that time to market, is really going to be a big boon for the companies investing in AI and data management.
Terrific. Sushant, you have anything you'd like to add?
Any investment on AI has to be outcome driven, right? The way we see here at Reltio and advise our customers, it has to be one of these three: whether you are driving growth, right, top line. Second is or going towards operational efficiency at scale, right, making your company or bottom line much more, I would say, efficient. A third, it is helping you to de-risk your company, right, fraud or enhancing compliance. So one of these three business outcomes have to be met around any investment, and even more with AI, right? So customers who are investing are looking at these benefits. So, for example, you are doing, in case of data management, specifically where Reltio comes in and data unification, right? The use cases are around data cleansing, right? You can use AI for data cleansing as well as enrichment at scale, or entity resolution or matching is an example where it is a fairly manual exercise, looking at 5 different profiles or looking at manually created match rules to be monitored by data stewards. It's a very manual activity, but using AI-driven matching and merging, using our frameworks, customers are able to completely automate where the system is looking at the data. The large language models are suggesting, predicting matches, and the same number of data stewards are able to bring the backlog down much faster, or customers needing fewer data stewards to do the same amount of work and improving the quality of data. That translates into growth, better customer experience, as well as better quality in the downstream systems.
That's terrific. I actually appreciate you offering some detail, because I think both you and David have hit on, I'm talking about speed and automation. That's just one aspect that we've touched on. Sean, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, certainly building on top of what Sushant and David highlighted, and going probably a layer deeper, is a lot of this really boils down to productivity of the data teams. And one of the things that we found over the course of time, and we actually do a tiny little survey annually around data team productivity and efficiency. And one of the things we found this year, very unique from prior years, is that 95% of data teams actually report being at or over capacity, meaning only 1 out of 20 teams really has capacity to start to explore new things. For example, AI. And one of the reasons why I think this becomes so important is as we started to dig a little bit deeper around it, and I think it's very much in line, Evan, with what you were talking about earlier, is these teams are slammed. They don't have a lot of excess capacity, yet at the same time, they're trying to help bridge that gap. I think we were talking about this before. It's that classic saying of the cobbler's kids have no shoes, where these data teams that are building the foundation of innovation for their businesses oftentimes don't have enough tooling and productivity themselves to really help the organization bridge into that future. And so where we see a lot of this really come into play is dramatic increases in productivity of those data teams, which directly translates to their ability to move faster yet safely. And AI, I think, helps tremendously with that. What I think that translates beyond just the standard AI to help you do the things we don't have time for, like testing and documentation, but very pragmatically for the teams. I think one of the most impactful things we're going to find is AI-assisted platform migrations. More often than not, when we talk to enterprise businesses, they're stuck in a prior decade of architecture, which you also highlighted in yours, is architecture is one of the #1 challenges. And this is because moving platforms is hard. And I got to tell you, there's not a single CIO, CDO, or CTO that I talk to that doesn't wish they were on a newer platform. But these tend to be 5 or 10-year cycles. And in the world of AI, this is terrifying because we're seeing a dramatic compression in iteration cycles. And as a result, anything that even takes 2 or 3 years is already dead on arrival.
You know, I think all three of you mentioned one thing that I'd have the audience be aware of is none of these products are free. There's inevitable costs associated, whether it be a software license or people time acquisition. But at the end of the day, what's rarely considered that's top of mind is how much time are we spending, and are we supply constrained? Or we demand constrained? In the early days of analytics, we were often demand constrained, where I could deliver more than the users could use. In many instances, what we see today is the users are waiting on data. They're waiting on developers. So when people take a look at what things cost, how much time they're going to spend, the thing that I'd encourage all of you to be aware of, I mean, all of you, the audience, is what's the impact of productivity, as all three of the folks have said, which is how do we make things accomplished quicker, faster, better? Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. So what are some of the data management, data engineering obstacles that AI technology can address? And Sujant, since you went second, how about if you go first this time? I'll let you lead off the response to this question.
Sure. So I'll focus on the data management part of the question, right?
Certainly.
So, right. So typical relative customer, right, has a particular, I would say, life cycle, right? When they onboard and then constantly bring data in for data unification, they have to profile the data before they bring it to Reltio, then match it with the data model that they have created, and then they load the data and enrich the data, and then obviously match and merge entity resolution, right? And every step of this life cycle is a wide application of AI that it is making impact, right? Very quickly, when you start bringing your data, even before you load it, now you can profile the data using AI at source itself, right? Once you have profiled it and know the data quality metrics on the fly, you can decide to load it in. And at that point, the AI is able to automatically identify the schema and load the data and map it automatically to the data model and load it in Reltio. That's right. Auto-classifying fields, inferring domains, and recommending mappings, right? That is a huge productivity push where we need people constantly to load data and monitor the data load cycles over the weekends or overnights, right? Because it's a business critical system. The next one is data enrichment, right? You're enriching your data with public data sources or private data sources like DNB or industry specific data sources like Metro for life sciences. This all can be done in the background using advanced matching by AI. And finally, the whole data unification part where we can use now a large language model which can do multi-language transliteration on the fly, because these models have been trained on almost all data of the world automatically, right? So the immense power of large language models are now aiding entity resolution and matching that we are passing on to our customers. So you can see the entire life cycle of where data originates and where it has to go to downstream. At every touch point, AI has an impact where it, as mentioned by Sean earlier, right, drives productivity for every team that was going to work on it. It can be automated to the level of a human in the loop, or fully automated for where customers are much more confident about the cycle.
You've hit on, pardon me, didn't interrupt, go ahead.
No, that's it, right? So yeah. It's just not a cool tech anymore. It has wide-ranging implications and impact.
Well, I think from an audience perspective, I think what you've really hit on is, if you consider the whole premise of onboarding, not just the first time I get a data set or 100 data sets, but then being able to track, did they change? Did they match my criteria? Yes. You're basically the backside of a grocery store. You're the receiving area, and the ongoing management, not just the first time, but every other time. Being able to use AI to automate all of that, frees staff up to do other things, similar to what we've heard from our other remarks. So no, really good paradigm shift. So the obstacle is, how do we automate the onboarding, which is probably the least sexy of all the things that we do. David, let me jump over to you. And what are your thoughts on this one?
So good segue, right? Automation of onboarding of data is really where we shine, right? We take things that took 12, 15 weeks before, we take them down to about 15, 20 minutes to actually do as part of an automation cycle. We are seeing people build and use vibe coding to take that data, to transform it and do all kinds of things. And I think that is a really interesting way that we're seeing people adopt AI around our processes. But I think there's another piece in here, right? So onboarding data is great, but actually, how do you get that data onboarded? How do you find out about that data and everything else? There's a lot of dark processes, what I would call, around that data set, right? How does somebody request access? All of those things. And AI, and we're working with a lot of partners now, is saying, okay, we're working through the pipelines. We understand how to move data, but there's still organizational resistance and things within the organization that are actually now the long pole in the process. So we're using AI to go after that. And then the goal of that, obviously new data sets, a greater percentage of your data is now available. And now you can use AI on more the consumer side to say, how do I understand, get new insights across that data. So we're seeing it across all areas around data engineering.
Okay, Sean, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I would. One, I'll definitely say, chime in with David. Fivetran is amazing. We actually use them internally as well at Ascend, and they do take the 12 to 15 weeks down to just, I think you said 15, 20 minutes. It might even be faster than that as well. In addition to just onboarding of data, I do think that there's a couple of other dimensions that are really important around the impact of AI, where AI is a high leverage piece for our teams. And so I talk about not just onboarding of data, but onboarding of teammates. And this is something we hear about a lot, again, talking to data leaders, is I got somebody new coming in, I got to be able to ramp them up. And it's a really big challenge because more often than not, things aren't properly documented. There's tons of code sprawl. There's tons of data sprawl. And this is where we've seen, actually, even in our own product, pairing a new developer with both not just chat systems, but actually a really intelligent suite of agents that have access to code, to data, to historical context, that understand how the system works, can check the entire Git history so they know who's been changing what for all time. The amount of time it takes to onboard a brand new teammate drops by orders of magnitude as a result. I think that's really important.
I think you've touched on something that folks haven't considered, which is how AI not only improves productivity, but it allows new staff to become acclimated. Pardon me for jumping in, interrupting you. So please continue if you had something else to say. Pardon me for.
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect dovetail to the second piece, which is very related. We'll call it part 1B, which is the democratization. we talk a lot about this notion of shift left, where if you think of a pipeline in your diagram, Evan, you had this where data is flowing from left to right. There's this tremendous movement, I think, that's happening where we want to shift left the business-minded users where they can work further and further upstream. That historically has been harder because you needed a BI engineer to understand SQL or an analytics engineer to understand Python. And what we're finding now with AI is we're enabling people who understand the business outcomes more, which I think we all agree is what we want, to work further upstream and self-serve in really powerful ways where it becomes more democratized. And that dovetails into the third piece I'll mention really fast is those deeper platform engineers that we see have already been building on our platform operations agents, where you can, rather than have your data engineers checking if the pipeline, as Shashank was highlighting, checking if the pipeline's running, if the data is getting properly ingested, you can turn your most senior engineers, your data platform engineers, into agent architects and agent engineers. And they're able to now actually create their own agents that monitor the efficacy and the operations of pipelines and get that scale factor. So I think this is like a really cool team dynamic transformation we're seeing.
Well, I mean, you're talking about AI removing some of the noise, and I don't mean to diminish the criticality or importance, but allowing not just new staff members to be acclimated, but actually non-technical folks to be acclimated. Let's jump to the next question. And since I've given everybody the opportunity to kick off one, I'll just stick with Sean so he has the opportunity to be the first responder on this question. Do you see a hesitancy in adopting AI and machine learning technology into the data engineering domain? So we've talked about all the phenomenal capabilities, but what about some of the obstacles or the hesitancy? Have you seen anything like that?
We have. We've seen it at the organizational level as well as the individual level. The general framework I recommend is teams got to move, and you got to move fast. Pure empirical, data-driven approach to this is the growth rate of AI is not following Moore's law. We're seeing AI computational power growing approximately 11x. I think it's 11.3x annually. And so if we take that and compound that out, over the course of 2 years, we will see more computational complexity and capabilities emerge from AI in just 2 years than we've seen in just hardware capabilities emerging since the launch of the iPhone, which is 2007. And so when we start to play that out and we think of how much is going to change and how fast, this should be driving an overwhelming sense of urgency inside of organizations to get started. I have heard from data leaders I don't think anybody thinks it's a fad anymore, but I have heard hey, we're going to wait and see how this plays out. And I think that is a tragic strategic decision to make. And you're going to have a bunch of projects that are going to fail, and that's okay. But you got to get in there and you got to start familiarizing your team and moving them through that cultural transformation. Because if you wait 2 years to see where things shake out, you're going to have an entire organization that doesn't have the right skills for the modern workforce. And so you're doing a disservice to your team, and you're doing a disservice to the business because you're not well tuned and versed in the culture of what is going to be required to be an AI familiar company.
I mean, what you're really hitting on is the hesitancy for change, but you're also touching on the 11x is not to poo-poo it, but any sort of analytic investment you see time and again, it's not an incremental or a linear growth. It's an exponential growth. You see warehouses, repositories, platforms, they don't grow by 10 and 20% at the early days. They grow by 100x in the early days because as people find more data, they find more insight. They see the insight, they want more data. And what you're really saying is with AI, they see insight, they want more. So the growth is staggering. So it's really about competitive disadvantage if they're not careful. So, I mean, you're saying attack the hesitancy of change. Let me jump over to David and let you add on to this, please, David.
So yeah, we're seeing a lot, right? There's a lot of wonder of what it can do. There's a lot of traditional enterprises who I think exactly doing that, right? They're holding back. They're seeing how AI, how others are adopting AI. We are seeing in the market itself how things that were not possible 2 years or 6 months ago are now suddenly available. And so from a traditional perspective, you kind of sit and wait. But the actual outside of the enterprise is actually speeding up, right? We're learning, the outside is learning and moving on. There are fundamentals that since the dawn of big data in like 2012, 2010, because there's been a lot of churn within organizations, they haven't met that full potential. They have still not, many have still not built like a pure data layer that's going to pull everything in, and that foundation. And so they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think that's where a lot of companies are at, right? They want to say, I know that I've got to do A, but I've also got to try and deliver to the latest things of the company. I think this piece here is the latest piece that actually enables our engineers. They're just not ready for it, or they're not used to going down that fast. And I think, people are hesitating when I totally agree. You should be out there. You should at least be learning and seeing how all of those things that you put aside for the last 10 years, you now start to go in and access. And it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't.
You're actually hitting a level of detail, which is, and maybe I'm reading too much on it, the whole premise of we've put off certain data management or data structure aspects. So there's a concern that AI can't attack it, because if I don't get my data house in order, I can't know what to study and turn AI loose. But then your other remarks, do it anyway and let these new generation of tools help you with the data management stuff that you put off. And hopefully the technologists will realize this is going to help you pick up speed. I mean, is that a fair, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's a fair summary. You've got to do both. You can no longer do one or the other.
Well, and you don't have to. You don't have to pick one or the other. You've got the tooling that helps. Sushant, next to you, what would you like to add?
So I would say I'm seeing a change from last year to this year, right? With I would say, arrival of agentic AI on the world stage. Suddenly, a lot of data leaders, CIOs, even CEOs are seeing the potential. So the way I see it is changing from hesitancy to maybe a healthy skepticism.
Okay.
And you can't really blame them, because their past investments, for one reason or another, did not pan out into real dollar outcomes. And then, so there are, right? So they're worried about, can I explainability? Can I audit what AI did, right? Can I override it? What if something goes wrong? So people who are in critical functions or having mission critical data, they are, I would say, skepticism a little valid, but I think it's up to us to prove it out using fast iterative methods, which are now possible, right? As David and Sean were mentioning, right? And it's something that could be done in 6 months can now be proven out in 2 weeks. And that is something that needs to be done for customers to build that confidence for them to completely be excited about. But I would say we at Reltio have definitely seen a change in our executive council meetings or events where customers are really excited by technologies like agentic AI, and they see the value that it can bring up to their both bottom line and top line, right? And the tooling gaps are need to be managed, right? I mean, people started, there's definitely lack of talent out there as well, because enterprises are looking for people from data scientists to MLOps engineers. So that also sometimes slows everything down. But I'd say that it's in the right trend where it is moving from hesitancy to being cautious, but definitely taking the first step.
Well, let's go ahead and jump to the next to last question, and let me ask each of you if we could do it quickly, because I'd really like to get the 2 last questions in. Let me go ahead and start with David. So, sure, you've touched on some of your experiences. Do you have anything else you'd like to share relevant to where AI has really improved data management? We've talked about the speed improvement, but what else, David, have you seen?
Well, I think it's maturity and speed, right? So 2 years ago, I remember sitting down with a partner, and they were talking about, okay, then how can we expose a chatbot to actually provision pipelines and move data within minutes, and make that available to anyone. So if I came in with a question and said, you know what, I need my data from my Oracle database, how could I ask for that? And it just get provisioned and the data starts to move. 2 years ago, you could see all the foundational pieces were there, but that was not really ready at that point. with MCP from Anthropic, we're starting to see those types of things become a reality. So that experience has now changed. And I think we're just going to see that all over the place. And I pulled that example because it's not a standard optimization of the pipeline. It's really around managing that relationship between the business and the IT department.
Sean, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to yes, and David's on this one. Since David, you mentioned MCP servers, we have seen, and this is probably going to sound a little more futuristic to folks, but I can tell you, we already have this running in production in our systems today, which are event-driven agents that also have access to MCP servers, which is really exciting when you think of in our platform. You can, as an engineer using Ascend, you can create your own agent with custom instructions, pick the tools you want. It has access to full Git history, full operational runtime history, all the changes, all the runtime, and you can have it do these really amazing things that are pretty transformative for data management. We specifically have agents run after every pipeline run. Every time you're processing data, every time it runs, analyzing the performance, analyzing the success or failures, corresponding that and correlating it with code that was checked in, and if anything had been changed and new had been deployed, and building up an entire set of information around what has changed, whether something needs to get triaged, and then sending that over MCP, whether it's to Slack, to Teams, to GitHub. And so now we actually have event-driven, that are reactive and responsive agents without a human in the loop, constantly and continuously analyzing how pipelines are running, which is really transformational when we think about this from a data management perspective.
And Sushant, would you like to wrap up this question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, similar to what Sean said, right? I mean, we are looking at the same way how MCP and A2A protocols are supercharging these initiatives, right? They're completely taken over. So we have built agents we have our own MCP server running at Reltio, which is powering agents to do entity resolution in a completely automated way. It is extending to business operations use cases. For example, one of the agents not only looks at the customer profile, but also the past interactions, orders, tickets that they have raised to do product recommendations, right? That can be fed into a customer service kind of a scenario. So we are not looking at only a data governance use cases, but also business operations use cases that can be fed by the data that is already there in Reltio, right? So the possibilities are immense. There are agents that will be human in the loop, right? Where a human will approve or give inputs to, but there are these, I would say, data profiling kind of agents that will constantly learn, look for anomalies, and then flag them for someone to review, but that will be running 24 hours. So I think agentic AI and tools like MCP servers are going to revolutionize this whole space.
Well, I think all three of you have touched on the whole premise of agentic AI, and I think what a lot of folks in the audience may not be aware of is it's actually allowing us to use this AI stuff now to address the operational exceptions. So I don't have to throw a human at it, but there's a whole class of activities that we can throw AI at to go chase. This brings us, we're coming very close to the end of time. Let me jump forward to our final question, and let me put a bit of a challenge. And Sushant, I'll ask you first. In a couple of sentences, tell us, if you could make one recommendation to the audience. We've covered a whole slew of issues, ideas, and turf in our discussion. We've talked about the benefits of automation, removing the obstacles, getting staff members to accept change, establishing a level of and sense of urgency. What one recommendation would you make, given everything we've discussed thus far, that you'd like the audience to have as a takeaway?
Sure. Yeah. If I have to say one thing, right, I would say invest in AI wholeheartedly, but anchor it in real-time unified data foundation, right? Whether you implement agentic AI, self-serve analytics, personalized real-time recommendations, automating data pipelines, none of that will work, and your initiatives will fall flat if the data is fragmented, slow, inconsistent, duplicate. You need a semantic layer that unifies data across customers, products, suppliers, or other core entities, and needs to be mobilized. Your agents need to work on data in real time with full governance and explainability built in, right? So once again, invest in AI, but anchor it on real-time unified data.
Data platform, correct. Excellent. David, one recommendation you can make to the audience.
So first thing is AI is going to make you a superhero, right? You can do a lot more today than you could do yesterday. So jump both feet in, find something impactful and fast that you can go in after and attack that problem. If it's something that hasn't been attacked before around that data thing in the organization, I think that's going to be really impactful. So, go out there, try it, and enjoy, have some fun.
What you're saying is, if you're going to attack things, find something that's broken. Don't fix the stuff that doesn't need to be fixed. Find something that's a problem that people can quantify and understand and value.
Exactly. Optimizations are great. Actually identifying a problem and really solving that is really impactful in most businesses.
Okay, Sean, back to you. What one recommendation would you make to the audience?
Number one recommendation would be get started. Very much in line with what Shashank and David are saying here is get started, lay a incredibly strong foundation from an architectural perspective, and make it an agentic friendly architecture, and find those wins. Get an early win, prove the value to the organization, but you got to get going. The pace at which this is changing is so fast that the premium is put on those who move and take action now.
Excellent. I mean, gentlemen, this has been terrific. Let me throw it back over to Andrew because I know that we've got some Q&A and I don't want to, no one needs to be listening to me at this point. So I'll shut up. Andrew, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Evan, and thank you all for that great conversation there. That was awesome. We do have several questions here. I'm going to start off with this first question. Maybe, David, I'll start with you, but if anyone else has something to add, please do so. This person asks, how repeatable are AI agents' results, and how are you making sure there's less hallucinations?
So that's a really interesting thing. I think hallucinations is something that a lot of agent frameworks are attacking. I know when we've built agents around it, there's the result and also identifying the data that came back with it, right? So we have to learn, you have to learn to trust data. You have to learn to understand whether your model is actually given a hallucination or whether it's coming up with something else. Give full context, give that full data chain as how it came up with an answer. And, the evolution in technology and managing hallucinations is coming up as well. So I think just visibility is the big thing.
Terrific. Anyone else want to jump in and tackle that question?
I can certainly. Yeah, I'm happy to share some of the things that we're seeing on our side. I think probably two key points here. First will be that yes, we still see with LLMs and agents that employ them certain levels of hallucination. But I think one of the really key points is the LLMs we're using today are the worst LLMs we're ever going to use going forward. They're only getting better. The hyperscalers and the primary platforms like Anthropic and OpenAI continue to invest in smarter and smarter and smarter LLMs that are incredibly, not fully deterministic, because we in many ways don't want that, but radically reduce the level of hallucinations. And we're finding, for example, in the reasoning models, they're really, really, really good at avoiding those hallucinations. So I think that's the first part. The second point that I would mention too is even when there's hallucinations or just errors that we see from these agents, feedback loops to the agents are incredibly impactful. Like one of I'd say that like the biggest aha moments we see with customers is when they watch an agent not just try to write code, but it gets that feedback loop of building the code, linting it, running it, seeing if that works, seeing if it produces a result, and allowing an agent to iterate. You will see it behaves very similar to a human in many ways and converge on the right answer. And so long as you have a great architecture and platform that allows you to do that in a way that's safe, generally adhering to proper data ops principles of the dev stage and prod promotion cycle, agents can do remarkably powerful things already today.
Terrific. Sean, Shashank, anything to add from you? If not, I can move on to the next question.
No, I mean, just a quick addition, similar to what Sean was saying. I think two things. One, we have to ground the agents, right, in whatever context we are talking about, right, whether using RAG or things like Llama Index, right? We have to provide enough context to the agent to not hallucinate or cook things up, for the lack of a better term, right? And second, I think feedback loops are very important while designing agents. Sean mentioned, right? Whether you have a human in the loop agent in the beginning, and then you have to ask the agent to learn from the actions taken and every decision taken to get it better over time. So yeah, there will be hallucinations in the beginning, but then I think as large language models become better, and as we become better in creating those prompts, this is not going to be a problem in long term.
All right, terrific. Thank you all for that. I think I'll squeeze one last question in here. This one just came in as you were all answering the last one. There's quite a bit to it, so I'm just going to jump to the end. The question is, how do we manage big investments strategically during this rapid evolutionary time? I will leave that open to whomever would like to step into that first.
I can take a stab first, and then Sean, David, you can add, right? So I think, like with anything, we got to be iterative here, right? We don't want to miss the bus, but so we need to make investments. So I would recommend to pick up the use cases where you will see the biggest business impact, right? Start with one of those use cases and apply these technologies or AI and agentic AI specifically to see the kind of impact that you want, right? Whether it's automation, whether it's driving efficiencies, improving productivity, any of that. Pick up a business division, a business unit, a particular use case, maybe a complex one, and then iterate and build upon that, right? And then try replicating it to multiple use cases or across different business units. And then every time you replicate it, then see what is the latest on improvement that has happened over the past few weeks, months, or last quarters. That's how I would recommend to go. I do not recommend big bang approach across the organization, but I also recommend picking up a very impactful use case and getting started immediately, not waiting for it to stabilize.
I have a comment on that. So there are things that will change and there are things that will not change, right? The data, the way that it's formatted, how much of that is accessible is going to be an ever-growing thing to answer more questions. Those things should be understood and invested in at the right level to make sure that that data is available for now, 6 months, and 5 years from now. The AI pieces, we're in a point where it's rapidly evolving. You will replace some of those, you will learn, we were building RAG applications for demos a year ago, and that is now considered obsolete almost. It's not, but it's just like that's the way that the market is going. If you've got your data foundation correct, it will evolve with it. Some of those pieces at the top, the agents, you will pull across. Some of those you will modernize as things come, the market evolves. You should also be thinking of that strategically. You don't want to be doing analysis paralysis on it, but it's pretty easy to say these things will change, these things will not. How do we make sure that we do the right things at each part?
Yeah, kind of building on top of that too, and just scanning the full question. I'll try and do this more in rapid fire to give you like really concrete sort of takes on this. As we spent a tremendous amount of time on the various tools and frameworks over the last couple of years, I would say be very careful about anything you build on your own. More often than not, I would say build versus buy is a very bad decision in this world. Don't try and build your own agent framework. That's just a really bad decision. Don't try and build your own vector database. Bad decision. Things you should stay flexible and agnostic on. Make sure you can support all the various LLMs and models. You may run Gemini today and want to try Anthropic tomorrow. So make sure you stay open on those. I would pick an agent framework, and I would pick one by one of the big players. Either pick Amazon's, OpenAI's. I think Anthropic has one too, but pick one of those where there's really strong incentive from a very large player who will fund it very well with an open framework that is open source. MCP is here to stay. That's a great bet. You can place bets on the MCP world. It's going to evolve, but everybody's adopted it at this point. So I think that's perfectly fine. And then beyond that, anything you build that abstracts away, just anticipate you're going to have to tear that out because it is impossible for you to keep up with the rate of innovation. There's too many dollars flowing into the space, and there's too much incentive for a lot of that stack to be productized, whether it's open source or by the big players. And so just be really careful about accidentally hamstringing yourself by building out too many of your own bespoke layers.
All right, fantastic. Well, that was excellent. And unfortunately, that leaves us with no time remaining today. So please allow me to thank our speakers. We did hear from Evan with TDWI, Sean with Ascend.io, David with Fivetran, and Sushant with Reltio. Would also like to thank, again, all those companies for sponsoring today's webinar. And please remember, we did record today's webinar. We'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. And finally, for those unfamiliar, TDWI hosts in-person events, and our next one is in San Diego, taking place August 18th through the 22nd. As a valued webinar attendee, we're offering each and every one of you $100 off any event package. Please check your post-webinar communications for a unique discount code and a link to further details. And from all of us here, let me say thank you so much for attending. This does conclude today's event.